Welcome. This is Pivot Point. I'm Nick Michael. There's a moment most people never forget. The one where something inside them finally says, this ends now. Not the polished version you tell at networking events, but the raw, private moment where you realize staying the same is actually more painful than changing. That collision of frustration, fear, and sudden clarity where, for once, your emotions and your thoughts line up and you move. That is what this podcast is about. Welcome to Pivot Point, Strategy for Change. I'm Nick Michael, a clinician and therapist with over 30 years of experience sitting with people at their hardest crossroads. When the marriage is breaking, the business is cracking, the body is breaking down, or the story they've been living in just doesn't fit anymore. Here, we're not chasing motivational slogans or neat before and after stories. We're getting into the messy middle, the exact moment where a decision is made and everything that follows becomes possible. My guest today is someone who lives and works right at that edge of transformation. Jen Wilson is an executive and team coach who has spent over 25 years helping leaders and organizations navigate growth, uncertainty, and change. She steps into rooms where the trust is fragile, stakes are high, and the old way isn't working anymore, and helps people find clarity, reconnect with their values, and choose a different way forward. So before we get into the frameworks and the tools, let's start where this podcast always starts, with the moment itself. Jen, thank you for joining us. When you think about your own life, what is the first moment that felt like a true "this ends now" pivot point for you as either a leader or personally?
Thanks, Nick. There was a moment, I want to say it was probably about 10, 15 years ago-ish now, where it was the busy season in my office. I was working in New York, and it was our busiest time of the year, and it was pretty close to midnight. I was one of the last people in the office, and I worked over, in the way over on the east side near the UN, and I'm leaving. So it's quiet on the streets, and as I made my way home to my Brooklyn apartment, and my third floor walk up, and I go inside and it's quiet. I'm exhausted. I'd barely eaten a proper meal. I realized, wow, this is my life, and this is not what I want it to be. And it was this moment where I had this realization that I had done all the things. I had gone to school. I had been what I called good. I had followed the path that I was supposed to. I got the good job at the great organization. My career was excelling really well, but I felt empty, and it felt like this is enough. And there were many parts of life that didn't feel coherent. And it was this point where I kind of made a decision that I had to really shift.
Was there a point where, can you describe the moment your thoughts lined up with your emotions and you knew at that moment, I can't keep doing it this way? What were you afraid of losing, and what were you afraid of would happen if you didn't change?
Yeah. I had been working, the crazy hours that many of us work when we come out of school. And I'd been doing it for many years. At this point, I was about 10 years into my career, 12 years into my career. And I loved my job, and I really loved the people I worked with. I loved the industry I was in. I was very connected to it. But in those quiet moments like that night, in that quietest moment when I got home, my life didn't feel complete. It felt like I had done all the right things, but I was still living like kind of paycheck to paycheck. I was still coming home alone. Most of my friends had left the city at that point. Whether they got married or they partnered up, they were having kids, they were leaving. And I would joke often that I was married to my job, but deep down inside, I felt like I could offer things different in the world, and that I didn't want it was this moment where I was sitting on my couch in my little 350 square foot apartment, which I loved. And I was looking around going, wow, is this it? Is this what my life is going to be like the next 30, 40, 50 years? Like, is this going to be what I'm doing? There was this feeling inside of me that was like, cannot be. This cannot be. I was exhausted. I could not be it.
So we often like to look at internal conflicts or resistance before change in your work? And I know the work that you're doing with leaders. Are there any moments where you realized what you were doing is not what you wanted to do, and then finding it later on, it all clicked? What was there something inside you that gave you that inner voice that
Yeah.
made you take a closer look? And then how did all that unfold? I'm curious.
Yeah. So I really believe that what I know now is that I really believe that we have this inner compass. And this compass over years, especially women excelling in leadership, this compass is driven by intuition. And intuition, we know, I think in society, especially when you're working in the work world, people want data. They want, and that, but I had this very strong intuition that I was silencing over many years. And so an example is I'd feel very strongly about something and it would take me a while to get the data to support that. But it was a visceral thing. It came from this point, this compass of my values. And in that moment, that night when I'm like sitting there, I knew I felt out of alignment. I knew that my intuition, it was like, it was a sometimes I think about it like this light that had so much stuff on it that it was so dim. And I knew that there was something that was like, this is not it, what I'm doing. I didn't know what it was. And I knew that I had fear of doing something else because I knew it meant going outside of what I had known. But it was this
So,
feeling that I knew it wasn't enough.
no, that's exactly it. As a woman in the business world, were there things that you sensed when you refer to your own intuition that were glaring, or some red flags that were coming at you that sparked the thought and then the level of motivation to take the next step? Was that part of it? Can you
Yeah.
describe a little bit more about what your thinking was like and if that had an impact on you?
Yeah. So a lot, hindsight's pretty amazing. When you're
Hmm.
further out from something, I feel like when you get clearer, like for me, when I've gotten clearer about who I am, the work I do, how I
Hmm.
power up and serve, it feels really clear. And when I look back at the breadcrumbs, it felt like something did. So an example is I knew that I was kind of a people pleaser, but I didn't know to the extreme.
Right.
I didn't know until I had done more work on myself and working with other leaders, because it's sort of reciprocal, right? When you're working on yourself and then you're in service to others, you also grow.
Yes.
Things like, I would allow others to take credit for the work that I was doing. And I know that there were negotiations internally. Well, if I do this, then it could mean this. Those were really clear signs when I would work, till late at night on something and I would allow someone else to take joint credit with me. And I think that's a lot like with women leaders. We sometimes, many times, often not, even when I start coaching, the first few conversations, there's a lot of we.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually, there is stuff that we need to be proud of I. And I think some of that comes
Hmm.
from that, imposter syndrome. It comes from people pleasing. It comes from not feeling like you have the language around
Mm.
your values and what you're bringing to an organization, not how valuable you are. Sometimes we get that confused, like
Right.
my work, but those values to that organization. I know for me, in hindsight, I see there were many moments of this along the way. If I keep working hard, they're going to notice me.
Right. Well, very well said. I'm curious, for many listeners that are sick and tired of being sick and tired and they haven't acted yet, what are some internal questions they can ask themselves
Hmm.
to distinguish whether this is truly a pivot point and not just a rough week?
Yeah.
What do you imagine would be a useful kind of question they can ask, or questions they can
Hmm.
ask?
Yeah. So I thank you for asking this question. So I feel like this concept, and I'm going to answer it starting with this concept of burnout. I think burnout has become this sort of almost en vogue thing for people to say that, oh, I'm burnt out. And oftentimes we wear it like a badge of honor. Right?
Mm.
Oh, I'm working so hard. I'm so burnt out. And I always love to call burnout because burnout is a real thing. But here's some of the things I wonder is when we say we're burnt out, when have we been able to get reconnected with the core of who we are? So what does that really mean? It's not really a quick fix. It's not that if I get a full night's sleep tonight, I'm going to feel refreshed, right? We now wear these things like the aura rings that tell us our sleep debt. right?
Yes.
And so here's a few things that I would love a few questions. So when there's this feeling of burnout or this feeling of like literally something doesn't feel aligned, it requires us to ask a question. The first one I always say is that what do I know to be true right now?
The reality.
What's the reality? And sometimes it takes a moment to get to that.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
see things, right? So I could be really upset and I could be really exhausted, but what do I know to be true right now? Well, I'm afraid. Like that moment, like my pivot point, I'm afraid I'll be alone.
What's impressive is the way you're describing it and what you're doing now. You're actually reliving it and you're bringing yourself back to the true emotion. So you're going right back to the core, which many people forget or don't or overlook because they're so busy just trying to push through, which is wonderful to see. Just
Yeah.
wanted to mention that.
Oh, thank you.
No, that's wonderful. That's so when someone feels emotionally overwhelmed or burnt or flooded, what practical steps do you suggest that they can use to move away just from that emotion and into a grounded state rather than just another impulsive reaction later on that they might regret? Because sometimes people might misinterpret. I feel strong about this. And we're not talking about the next stage is quitting, but how do you make that distinction for yourself?
Yeah. So the first thing I really encourage people to do is to really pause and step away. There's very few situations we get into, and of course they exist, where we can't just step away and come back to it the next day. And so there's all
Hmm.
strategies like you get the email, you've read the tone in it, you write your email,
Yes.
you can
Yes.
pause it for the next day.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I'm
Like
actually
sleep on it. Yeah.
sleep on it, right? But I'm also saying what I also encourage is to go even deeper than that. It's the pause and going to, okay, what is truly going on? What's the true insight? What's happening with my compass? Am I clear on what my values are and how close to them am I? Is this situation a situation that I'm living in alignment with that, or am I out of alignment with that? And I coach a lot of really high functioning folks, people who are on the surface, they're hitting their goals. Like many of your listeners, right? We have
Right.
successful lives we live,
Yes. Yes.
right? But there's this layer underneath where we're questioning, am I enough? Am I doing enough? And so a lot of times when we get that, so the first thing is really coming to get to that alignment, reconnect with that core piece. And so to do that, we need to make sure we're really clear on our values. And I have a values workbook, which I'll share the link, which you can share with your audience.
Sure.
It's a free workbook. But it helps you actually get to this point. Like if you're like, actually, I'm not even sure what I value anymore, you could kind of work through it. And so that's the first thing is being really clear about my core values. The next is really analyzing, how close to these values am I? Not just analyzing it up here, but also in your heart. And then the third part is this sort of so what, now what? So now that I see this, what feels like the right next step that's here? And a lot of times we kind of already know
Instinctively. Yeah.
instinctively,
Yeah.
like we look at it and go, yeah. And so when that right next step becomes a real work, well, how am I going to make those steps? So I think about that night on my couch. I knew that wasn't how I wanted to live that way. I knew I was out of alignment with those core values. I knew that there were a few things to do. I didn't quite know how they were going to happen, but I knew that those are the path.
So it's familiar when you refer to it that way. You understand the what and the why, but the how was not there yet. And with your growth mindset, you were willing to trust your emotions and let them guide you. And I like the way you put that. So if a listener recognizes themselves in your story, someone who's high functioning, successful, and they are feeling quietly misaligned, what is one small, let's say, non-dramatic action they can take in the next 24, 48 hours to start moving towards their own pivot?
Yeah. Gosh, great question.
Take your time. I'm not,
Yeah. Yes.
this is the reality of what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And this is the, that not the aha yet, but right? And
Yeah. So one thing I would really encourage is and this is also if you're like got to that point of like, I need things to shift. I'm not sure how. I have some idea, but I'm not sure how. I have an opportunity to spend a lot of time with artists, and getting creative and the imagination, I think, is part of this. So one very concrete thing is do something you usually do, just do it different. And it can be as simple, like here's a very simple thing I did for a period of time, which was I had the same route to work every day. I stopped at the same coffee place every morning. They knew my order. I made a shift. I decided not to do that. I went to a different coffee shop. It seems very simple, but what it did is it shifted me. It shifted a few things. It shifted me up. It was a different creative act. It's a very simple thing to do. Because the truth is, a lot of the leaders and I work with some entrepreneurs, they don't have time to like stop what they're doing and do drastic things. So what are
Yeah.
the incremental things? And then the question becomes, what did you notice? Right. And so
Go
using
back
that
to the
example,
awareness.
going to a different coffee shop, I can actually remember doing this at one point, and I went to the new coffee shop, which I don't even think is there anymore post pandemic. And I can remember realizing, whoa, I was like, wow, I actually do have a preference in the kinds of lattes I like. It was so weird. Before that, I was just like, doesn't matter. Every coffee is every coffee. But I had this moment where I was like, whoa, I do have a preference. What did that teach me? It taught me actually, yeah, I do have a thing I like and I don't like. And that for me was very novel because I was so used to just like, whatever anyone else wants to do, I'll do it too.
When you look back at your journey from global leadership roles to coaching leaders to transformation, what pivot point stands out most that surprised you?
Yeah. Yeah. So after that moment in my Brooklyn apartment, fast forward, I really wanted to be married. I met my now husband, then boyfriend. I always joke our first conversation. I was in New York, he's in LA. That first conversation, he said, before we get started, I'm never moving to New York. I always joke. And I say, I didn't even know his last name at that point, which I did. But I also thought, like, who wouldn't want to live in the greatest city? From that point, I moved out to California and we got married and all the rest. But there was this moment where I moved out here. I thought it would be like so easy, like I can live anywhere. Boy, was it challenging. And within 5 months, the company I had been working for 18 years had a large layoff, and they laid off a lot of the top layers of the organization. And so I got this gift of a layoff. And, I was already looking for another job. The commuting back and forth was just too much between LA, San Francisco, and back to the East Coast. But it was this moment where when that happened, it happened on a Tuesday over Zoom. This is pre-pandemic. I booked a plane ticket on Friday. I went to Maui, flew to Maui
Nice.
for a week.
Beautiful
And when
there.
I came back, there were only two things that were really clear. And this is where it comes to that inner compass. Number one is I never wanted to work for anyone else again. And
That's
then
it then.
secondly, that I never wanted another leader to experience the things I had experienced.
So I'm feeling wonderful to hear this because that's exactly what I look forward to hear. So
Yeah.
so what was the emotion attached to all of that?
You know,
Or thoughts, if you want to bring back to the thought?
it was the emotions of ending something where I had been for a long time. And I always thought like I would be, and yeah, there's definitely loss, right? When you pour
Right.
your soul somewhere for a long time and the people and you believe in the mission. But there was such a level of peace and clarity that I was super clear about those two things. And I really believe when you get clear about what you are meant to do, what you're here to do in this dot of the universe, that it's like the wings of confirmation come under you. I I started my company right away. I started working with some organizations and leaders, got credentialed as a coach. And when I get to really be in service, because I look at my work like being in service, it's really, I feel at my joyous moment. And I know because when I can hold those spaces for the discomfort, I always say I work in those parts of organizations that nobody wants to work in. And I
Yes.
hold that space that I know I'm doing the right thing because confirmations come with that.
See, so you're recognizing where your place is. See, many others will not be comfortable with that. When I worked in hospitals, certain people gravitated. I think the personality, I'm a firm believer that the personality picks the profession. And even if you look in the medical field, whether you're a nursing or a doctor or any other service, even in psychology or social work, you'll gravitate. Some people enjoy the ER, some people can't stand it. Other
Mm.
people want to be surgeons or they want to work on the units. Other people cannot stand that. So you found your place and you feel that comfort with all that. But what I also want to point out though is you literally had an emotional, a cognitive and a physical change pivot altogether. And you viewed the layoff as an opportunity for growth, essentially. Yeah. So you certainly took those steps, which is wonderful to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, when things like that happen, and especially when you've been somewhere a long
Right.
time.
That's
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that there weren't all kinds of emotions from they swung, but really where I landed is there was this moment where knew that layoffs were happening because the company had a set of rolling layoffs, and this is in an industry where that didn't happen that often then at that time. Now it's been a little bit different, but and I was driving somewhere, and I think I was kind of crying. I was at a stoplight, and I had this like as I'm waiting for that light to change, I had this moment that came over me that was like, oh my God, I'm actually having a fear that they're going to keep me and
mm,
not let me go. And it was a moment, that was the moment where now I'm like crying and I was kind of laughing. I must have looked insane if anybody saw me in the car. But it was that moment where I knew, and I really thought about that moment I shared at the beginning of our story of like, I knew it wasn't enough. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but this isn't the life I wanted to leave. And look what I have done. I found, my amazing husband. I moved out to California. Okay. I never thought in a million years I'd ever live in LA, but I'm here. I'm now like, this job that really was in service of me for so many years. It helped me get to where I am. No longer was, as I was aligning my life, here it goes. Now it's transitioning. So I think the lesson in all of this, and I have confirmation after confirmation like that as I moved in the right directions, that is that we have to be in tune. It comes back to like letting that sort of compass get really clear and being able to have it so we can notice when those confirmations are happening. You can call it confirmations, miracles, doesn't matter what you call them. It's being able to be switched on enough. And like we all know, some of the hardest moments is really where the most incredible things happen on the other side.
very well
Life is
said.
very much crisis and victory. And so I think
Yes.
one of the things for me I've had to really remember is that every time something feels like a crisis, that there is a victory of some sort on the other side of it. And yeah.
See, the way you describe it again, and I can see how your expression and you're going back to almost like a default kind of center that knows this and trusts. And that's what I'm wondering whether or not some people may be reluctant to trust their own gut or their instinct. And then those are the decisions that are difficult for many to make. Well, looking back now, how did that pivot influence the way you now help leaders align their work with their core values? Because I'm sure that was instrumental in providing them
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. So what I do now is I start from a place where I believe in my core that everybody is creative, resourceful, and whole, and that each of us have the capacity to do to to achieve great things, and so I see my role a lot in really accompanying and holding the space and working alongside them to get to that. So what it looks like in an organization is oftentimes I'm brought in when an organization is ready to pivot into something new. It might be a new strategic plan, it might be a new piece of technology, or they're a startup that's scaled really fast. And so I work with the team to align themselves in the phase that they're in. And so I have a model that I use. I really rooted in the reverse engineering model where we go back and we get clear about, okay, what is it we're trying to do and how do we do it? And this is really important, Nick. The leaders and teams I work with are high powered, high performing. They've hit all the goals before. They know how to do it, but they know how to do it from a place of brute force. They know how to do it from that place of exhaustion.
It's exciting to hear you explain that. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what we do together is we get really clear and aligned. We address those messy pieces in the middle, whether it's around communication, whether it's around, how we work together. And then we align around them and I work with them to hit their goals, not from that place, not from the place that now we hit this goal and now we just know that that's the start of another season. And so I get to work with these teams both as a group, individually, and the leaders. And then I also work with entrepreneurs, and I do that often in group programs. So I have group programs that I work with them, because the other thing I've learned is that often we don't want to do it alone. We want to do it with others.
And I'm sure when you walk into a room and in your presence and in your delivery, knowing you even before you get there's a level of trust and connection. So you emphasize aligning leadership with core values.
Hmm.
So in practice, where do leaders most often experience misalignment? And what are the early warning signs that you notice?
Yeah. What I notice is they're saying one thing, but their body is saying something
Hmm. And you notice that right away. You can bring that. Yeah,
right
that's good.
away.
That's a
Yeah.
therapeutic method. Obviously, you're
Yeah.
familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like that's a human connective.
Yeah. No, no, it's instinctual. Yeah, which is wonderful to hear.
And it allows us when we can slow down, right? So there's that space to be able to do it. So all my clients know one of the things I'm always doing is I'm interrupting and I'm saying, okay, we're gonna pause and slow down. We're gonna
That's
breathe.
great, though. That's good.
That's way to breathe, right? So that we can get to that deeper insight and wisdom.
Well, you're slowing them down. So during times of organizational disruption, trust is often strained. What does rebuilding trust actually require beyond communication alone that you've
Yeah.
noticed?
So trust is when trust is broken,
Hmm.
there I have a view on this that could be unpopular. Oh, but you can't pay anyone millions of dollars to come in and do a bunch of workshops on trust.
Mm,
It's not going to rebuild trust. Trust gets rebuilt in action. And that the way I've seen trust get rebuilt is when you have a team that is, number one, committed to the same outcome. Number two, willing to do the work. And it's not just the work of like showing up to the meetings, but it's that internal work that's required. Cause and this from the work you do, like we bring our whole selves. As much as
hmm.
we say like we separate it, we can't separate it, right? We can't, because we're whole people that are showing up to work. So I think when teams are willing to go that extra, to take those steps around, okay, to be able to do, and I have some assessments I use that become about the team. Like, let's look at the team dynamic. And sometimes that's really helpful because it's not very personal initially, but then it's willingness to look at it. So it's this sort of willingness to be like, I may not be fully right. So for me, that's part of the first building blocks, is being able to create that actual common language. The next is really how we speak with each other and interact with each other, and how brave we can be to have courageous conversations with
Mm.
each other. Right. And then thirdly, there's structural things like how meetings are used. I mean, these are very concrete. We have meetings, but I cannot tell you how many times I go in and I'll have conversations with leaders and teams. They'll tell me, well, we have these certain cadence of meetings, and I'll ask, what do you do with them? And really, even me, who's like talker and I love being in conversation, half of those meetings could be an email. So how are we really using our time together? And so these are some concrete things, but everything starts with the individual. We have to work with not just the individual, but the group at the same time.
So well said. It's very impressive, the kind of work that you're doing. I'm in awe right now. I'm curious about many leaders, from what I know, intellectually, they understand what needs to change, but they struggle to execute it.
Hmm.
So what typically gets in the way? What if emotion, fear, the system itself, or what gets in the way for some leaders?
Yeah. So I think there's many like practical things, because I think the third component of working with organizations is the organizational structure. So you have the individual, you have the teams, and the community, and then you have the structure. But there's this other thing that's come up that I've noticed. So and I'll share an example. I coach somebody who is a partner at a big firm, and they super successful, like really successful, wonderful, wonderful person. And it's been interesting as we've been coaching around their next step in their career, because they want this thing. And one of the things I'm realizing after all this time is that there's this fear. There's a little bit of fear about really being seen. And also this fear of failure. And so you kind of see these things walk hand in hand sometimes. This fear of failing, and then the fear of being seen. And so it's an interesting thing. And I'm sure there's leaders that'll be listening going, Jen, that's not the case. But I would challenge it, because when we slow down, when we have an opportunity to really, really slow down, slow the work that I get to do, That is the quiet thought. So it's that quiet, I call them the 3 a.m. thoughts. Those ones that when you wake up, and I know it because I felt it. It's that panic of like, am I going to be able to keep up with this? Especially when you lead big teams and you feel like everyone's depending on you.
Hmm.
That's that part. So those are some of the things that this sort of fear of success and this fear of failure that often hold tension.
I can see how natural it is for you to go there. And I could imagine how when you do press pause, when you're noticing that it's happening, I can see everyone that's participating in the work that you're doing follow you there with a level of trust, because that is most important for you to be able to bring them there and that they will be following you. And then at the same time, you're demonstrating by example what needs to be done. And I can see you're working with the process and you're breaking it down and
Yeah.
then illustrating it for them, because those emotions, the fear, the anxiety, the worry, the level of I've got to prove, I've got to prove. And then that's that nonstop train that makes everyone ignore it because they're trying to just fast forward and they're not trusting in the process because they're not accustomed to that. I just wanted to bring that to your
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wasn't sure if you noticed that in some of the examples that you can give. If that happens, does that
Yeah.
happen a lot? It sounds like it does.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I know that I've built this tool and this capacity to be able to help support people to kind of, I
Yeah.
always like open up, not just open up by what they're saying, also create some expansion
Hmm.
and feel safe to share, you know? And when it comes to the work as a coach, we get to results faster.
Hmm.
Clients get to results faster, the more we can kind of open up in that way. And like I was saying before, I believe everyone's creative, resourceful, and whole. So and all their success in our coaching is theirs. And so yeah, the more we open this up and we create that space where trust can be built quickly, what I see is people hit their results. Because the truth is, Nick, these my clients don't need to hire me to hit their goals and their KPIs. They're doing it. That is, they might come to me and ask me for that. Like I need to, I'm looking for this next promotion. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But they know how to do it. They haven't got to the C-suite without knowing how to do that kind of thing, right? And so the piece that we get to work on and I get to have the honor of witnessing is when they get to really own their leadership, or they get to really lead their business in a way that feels like it's aligned and wholehearted.
So how do you enable then, because we're talking about being vulnerable at the same time, being open, you're trying to illustrate to everyone to have a growth mindset and to let their defenses down. How do you manage to do that with the people you work with then? What's most important? Because there's a level of trust that has to come from this. Is it safe? Am I safe? We're talking about doing group work. So how
Yeah.
does that?
So I have a process by where I really believe learning happens in action. That you can go and do courses, and I can offer courses. I could give talks. I can give workshops, and I do all those things. But true learning, true transformation happens in action. So we. In the group program, which I have coming up, I'm launching the next cohort of it. What we do is we get really clear first before coming in to the program around what is it that I'm trying to do. It might be someone moving out of corporate to start their own business. It might be
Mm,
someone taking the next promotion. It might be someone working in a company already, and they're going to, they're launching a strategic plan in a year or something. The subject matter, they have to be really clear about what it is that they're doing. And then through the program, we do a couple of things. We really realign around their values and their core values so that they're not just winning their goals, right? And hitting them, but that they are doing it from a place of clarity. So they're knowing
mm.
say what to say yes to and what to say no to. And we do that in action. So as they're taking action to do this, and that's why I love group programs that run about 5 or 6 months, because it allows us to be able to be on that journey for a while together. So that's the first. Then we get to really reclaim our place, right? And for some of us, it's really stepping fully in to the role that we're in. And for others, it like myself, it was actually departing and moving to something else. And then we get to really get clear around, and this is where the strategy really meets with the core part, is being able to really reverse engineer into this. So if I'm building this business, we get to look at the money, which again in action gets us all kinds of stuff when we start talking about money, right?
Mm,
Like if I'm building a business, I need X amount of dollars I need to make. How am I going to get that? All of our stuff. Again, everything is we align in action. And then it's the sort of the next phase of, okay, now I'm heading towards my goals. How do I support others as they get into theirs? Because a lot of people that I work with, they're thinking about their legacy beyond that as well.
yes.
So we do this in a group program. I do this with one-on-one clients. My group program, I think, is the best place for people to come into, because underneath all of it, people love to be in community. They love
Yes.
to be in community. When you have a community of 8 to 12 peers, where you're going on this journey together, where you're really not only getting coaching from me, getting the group, but you're making these one-on-one relationships. People get to really build their next thing from that very aligned place.
Amazing. Well, so well said. So when you work with entrepreneurs and organizations and they're looking to scale, what is the most common mistake leaders make when trying to grow too quickly? Because everyone is very excited and wants to, that you notice.
Yeah. So I think that there's two things that happen. I think the first is, especially if the leader, speaking even more about the entrepreneurs, like that if they're also often the founder, the first mistake is they're moving so quick with their vision that they forget that their team may not be moving as quick as them. That's the first. The second is what I've noticed, and I think this is a really big one, is that when an organization scales fast, right, over a couple of years, there's an organization I was coaching some leaders at. They went from 10 employees to 400 employees over the course of 5 years. That is a huge growth.
It sounds like a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. But they were still operating as if they had 10 employees. So I think leaders who are building, whether it's building a startup, whether it's building a new department at an organization, whether it's a reorganization and now it's being restructured, I think one of the biggest mistakes is they try to move faster than their team is ready to. The second one is that when they're getting ready to do something big, whether it's a reorganization, a new strategic plan, shifting some way that they're working, or the other area is maybe they're going to go through a huge new branding. That's another big area. They focus in on doing that and starting to bring people into it, but everyone else isn't ready for that shift. I see there's a mistake that's made of not really preparing your teams to get ready for whatever this new next phase is. So one is, I think, trying to move too fast and forgetting about teams. And then secondly, still trying to lead organizations that are small, 10, in my example of 10 employees, but at a 400 employee level. It's something very different.
Looking ahead, I'm curious, how do you see leadership evolving in the next 5 years? And what capabilities will be non-negotiable for those who want to lead well through change?
Yeah, such a great question. I think that I really believe, and the data's proving it, is that in many organizations, many companies, this old kind of command and control type of leadership is not what's going to bring us forward. We know the data that's out there that people will quit a job because of a leader. They will take a position that is lateral or for less pay to work for someone that they want to work for. I think that especially as these new generations are coming into the workforce, they're looking for a level of empathy that exists.
Connection. Yeah.
They're looking for
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
I think they're looking for freedom and connection going hand in hand. Sometimes it's a little confusing. I also think that leaders that have an awareness of what's happening around them and not just in their tunnel world, I think I think people are looking for that in leadership. And I think people are looking for clarity. They're
I
looking,
love the word clarity that you used. That.
we've had so much ambiguity over,
Hmm.
I mean, forever, but
Hmm.
definitely the last 5, 6, 7 years that people want clarity. They want stability. And so I always say clarity is kind. They want you to be clear when you can be clear and really clear when you can be clear about something. And I think people are looking for that. You know, there's that whenever I do these 360s where I do a bunch of interviews around leaders, and that's a lot of the threads that come out. I want to feel heard. I want to feel connected. Usually when I hear those things, there's something in the structure that is preventing that.
Right. That's blocking. So tell me something though. I'm curious about the present generation in their 20s. Not the millennials, but the Gen Z kids, like
Yeah.
my kids.
Yeah, they're great.
They're very different
They're
to a
very different.
degree. I mean, everybody's different. I'm just referring to what differences do you notice stand out for the Gen Z kids that you find is glaring, and that when you're working with them, whether you're coaching or leading, or if you're managing them, if somebody's a manager, what do they need to know about Gen Z children?
Yeah. Such a great
I know
question.
it's a general question. I know it's a
You know
big
what? I
question.
spend a lot of time, I do a lot of community service and I'm around a lot of Gen Zs. And I won't embarrass myself by speaking their lingo because I've also learned that that means it will become very uncool if I do. But
Right.
there's a few things I've
But I
known.
could see you connecting with many. So
Yeah,
that's the
I got
point.
a lot.
There's,
I spent a lot of time with them,
you're a
right?
natural at, connecting with people, and the young people are the ones that we always have to figure
Yeah,
out as
they
we
really
grow
are.
older. Yes. How do we connect with them? They are
How do we
taking
connect
over
with
the
them?
workforce. They are the backbone
Yeah.
at times, and we're handing that over, but they don't have the same culture or value sometimes.
So I'll answer that with maybe a story about in my leadership. So I was a middle manager when the millennials hit the workforce, and nobody was ready for them, right? And so I got to really learn about, okay, here they come. They are built wired differently. They don't have the same. I'm a proud Gen Xer. They do not come from there. We are
But I
not built the same. We are not built the same. And I have a story I always share about one of my wonderful team members wanted to be rewarded for showing up to work on time, and I was like, that's bare minimum, right? But one of the things I really learned is that they were not built the same, and they had things that I did not have, right? And so I always would kind of use an analogy that I had to set the sandbox parameters, right? And then I had to move out of the way. And when I did, they built beautiful things. And so I have story after story over that. So now looking at our Gen Zers, right? They are built differently. These are pandemic kids. Their world was online, right? The great thing about that is their connection. They don't have a world. They never lived in a world without a computer, right? They also watched systems fall around them. They watched academia fall around them. They watched their sporting, their places of connection.
and increases mistrust
And it increases
in the standard system,
in the,
political, whatever you want to call it. Yes. Yeah.
you got
Good.
it.
Well put. Yes.
So the first thing I realize is they are not going to follow a conventional path for the most part. They like to follow the alternative path. I mean, I have met more than this many, TikTok influencer Gen Zers who are making 5 times as much money as me every month, right? Because they followed a non-traditional path. Well, how does it help me if I have a bunch of Gen Zers coming to work for me, right? I have to really think about it. And I use the story of the millennials to say, okay, what are the parameters? Because I also think part of leading a team, you are in service, particularly to this younger generation coming in. So how am I creating parameters that they can work within? And how am I moving out of the way for them?
I love the way you say that. Set up the sandbox, move out of the way. I love that. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think these tools around being able to communicate. Here's what I know and here's what I don't know. I've been coaching a lot of leaders through over the last, particularly the last year, in industries where they're downsizing a lot, they're having to let go of a lot of people. It's really, and the people that are still there, they're not feeling as committed because they don't know what's going to happen. It's a lot of these Gen Zers, it's a lot of these younger millennials. Yeah. It's a different
So
vibe.
that exactly, and you know, we probably connect because we're both extras, but that's not the only reason why we connect. But anyway, so how do you then? How can you suggest to any? I talk to a lot of business people, small business, large business, you know, entrepreneurs, and different people who are not millennial or
Mhm.
Gen Z, and you know, baby boomers, and even you know, and there's always this. Oh, so how do you advise or recommend, if you could, for a listener who says, "Yeah, those kids," and I hate that we have to refer to it that way because every generation refers to those kids,
Mhm. Mhm.
but our kids now in their 20s are much
Yeah.
different, I think. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the computer, the devices. The devices are showing up in kindergarten, first and second grade. That's an aspect that we've never had that before. There's a lack of connection directly. Everyone is used to texting, hello, goodbye, I don't want to be with you anymore, let's go out, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And there's a disconnect with people who are in power, like, you know, the boomers and the even millennials who are in power. There's a disconnect, yet you're right, they all want to do things their way. What suggestions can you provide for any listener who is in a field of authority or has a business and entrepreneur? What can you
Yeah.
suggest?
I really, well, this is what I would say. Every generation coming into the workforce, and in fact, even thinking beyond generation, everyone who comes into the workforce has something to contribute. It's there. I really believe in my core and in my heart, and this is when it comes back to the values. I really believe that. And I see leaders that come from a place of like, okay, this new generation is coming in. They're bringing in a lot of things that are pushing me, right? A lot of things that are making me feel really uncomfortable. That's my work. That's my work to do as the leader. Then my work for my team is, how am I creating, whether you consider it a sandbox, a container, how am I doing that for my team so that I can actually have my team contribute the most powerful creative things that they can bring, right? And so I think that it's the first of like of big really believing everyone has something to contribute. It's the second is, what do I need to do to show up as a leader for them? And then it's the third of creating those parameters, that opportunity for them to work within. Because if
Well
they
said.
don't know, they're going to go. Because I do believe that everyone's just trying to do the very best they can based on what they have. And these Gen Zers coming in, they aren't gonna be satisfied with the status quo. They will not be. And that's not a bad thing. It's hard for me as a Gen Xer to say that. I can remember when younger generations were coming in and they were changing things down to the colors of the files I used. I felt some kind of way about it, right? That's my work. That's not their work, right? Because when I'm building a company, I'm building a department, when I'm leading a team, I'm on the side of growing the organization. So,
Well said. Um, as we come to the end of our conversation, I just want to extend my heartfelt thanks to you, Jen, for speaking with such authenticity and openness. I know revisiting these experiences isn't easy, and I deeply appreciate your courage in sharing not only where you've been, but also the path that you're on and what you're doing. It's remarkable. I think it's amazing. what strikes me most is how your story reminds us that pivot points aren't just a single moment. They continue to emerge in life and unfold, often in ways that we all don't expect. And this, of course, may be one chapter of your journey, but it's far from the whole story. I also want to make it clear that for you and for my listeners, that the door here is always open here on Pivot Point, Strategy for Change, for you to return to share again any other story that you find is most compelling. So should other pivot points arise that you'd like to explore, reflect on, or share, you're always welcome to return to this space. Thank you again, Jen, for trusting this conversation and for offering such meaningful insights. And to everyone tuning in, thank you for joining us and for engaging with these stories of growth and resilience and transformation. If today's discussion resonated with you, I encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can find Pivot Point Strategy for Change on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and for deeper dives on Substack. Jen, thank you very much again. I look forward to continuing and connecting with you, and to, of course, other future work that we might be able to do together.
And Nick, thank you so much for holding this space. This is really, really important work for everyone. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much. I'm Nick Michael, and I look forward to connecting with all of you next time on Pivot Point Strategy for Change. And I'd like to leave you with the one question I'd like to ask. What's your pivot point?